See if you can solve this quick logic puzzle. You're traveling down a path and reach a barrier that you need to carry an object through. But every time the object passes through the barrier, it's destroyed and gets reset. You can pass through the barrier, but the object can't. You cannot get rid of the barrier, you cannot move it, and there's no other pathway around it. So how in the world do you get this object across the path to the other side? The answer, it turns out, is that you're asking the wrong question. It's not how in this world would you get it across. It's how can you use another world to manipulate the situation. This thought experiment is the essence of COCOON, a brain-bending puzzle adventure from one of the very best minds in game design. From start to finish, COCOON presents progressively more complex, world-jumping puzzles like this one, yet it manages to guide the player through them in subtle ways that makes the game more accessible than it has any right being. The chaos created by manipulating worlds within worlds and constantly jumping between each of them is controlled so effectively that the result doesn't feel like chaos at all. In fact, the experience ends up being one that's somehow smoother and more intuitive than most other puzzle games that don't attempt even half of what COCOON does. This fluid experience isn't luck. It's the result of some very precise design choices that build a framework of subtle guidance and excellent pacing, breaking down a complex core puzzle element into something much more digestible to the average player. And today we're going to find out exactly how COCOON manages to accomplish this. Oh, and don't worry, I won't be spoiling any specific puzzles or talking about them in detail. We'll be focusing strictly on the design of puzzles and levels in a broad sense. So follow me. Okay, let me lay some groundwork to explain exactly what COCOON's premise is and how it operates. These right here are the foundation of COCOON's entire experience. Within each glass-like orb you see here exists an entirely separate world, which you can transport your character into whenever you find one of these special reflective pools of water. But you can also pick the orbs up and carry them with you, and each one provides a sort of special ability while you have it on you. So for example, the orange one materializes pathways where they wouldn't normally exist, while the purple one has unique properties that allow it to be transported in ways the others can't. Where things really start to get interesting though is when you take one of these orbs with you inside another one, essentially creating a world within a world, as well as giving you the ability to use each orb's special power within each environment. This process of fusion can theoretically take place multiple times, eventually creating scenarios during which you're carrying one world into another, then out the other side again with all sorts of combinations. If that concept makes your brain hurt, fear not, because COCOON's superpower is its ability to facilitate you through these many twisting interactions without you ever realizing what it's doing. And before you know it, you're seamlessly traveling between worlds by instinct, with almost always a strong understanding of what you need to accomplish to solve each puzzle. So how does COCOON manage to take this complex mechanic and turn it into a very natural-feeling tool in the player's tool belt? Well, a few ways actually. It simplifies interactions, it eliminates possibilities, it expedites actions, and in some cases, it provides direct guidance. So let's take a look at each one of these methods in more detail. One of the most amazing things about COCOON that I consistently forgot about while playing it is that it manages to implement a variety of puzzle types, a myriad of environmental interactions, and a constant flow of traveling through worlds, all with a single button. That's right, COCOON is the perfect GameCube game. Literally all you need is the control stick and that thick boy A button to complete the entire game. There's no jumping, no attacking, no camera controls. You don't need it. All you need is the ability to interact. While this may sound overly simplified at first, it's not uncommon for some of the best puzzle games to eliminate unnecessary options and instead focus on one single mechanic, then find ways to expand upon that mechanic. In The Witness, for example, the entire game is built around solving these box puzzles by moving a cursor through a simple grid. But the game does a brilliant job finding variations on this, with each area establishing a new set of parameters you need to solve for. Now is also a good time to mention that the design lead on COCOON is Jip Carlson, who, thanks to the marketing of this game, is now famously known as the design lead on the hit puzzle platformers LIMBO and INSIDE. Both of those games use a similar control scheme, only allowing your character to jump and grab. But despite these limited options, Carlson and the rest of the Playdead team managed to create some remarkably lively puzzles and gameplay variety. By keeping controls direct and simple, Cocoon frees up the player to focus on the game's puzzles themselves and spend brainpower mapping out how elements in the environment interact with each other, rather than how you're supposed to interact with them. And that's not to say that every puzzle contains the same interactions, because the truth is Cocoon uses a variety of puzzle templates, starting with something as simple as activating a switch to move a platform, and culminating in something as complex as having to interact with something in one world in order to cause an effect in another. The fact that it does all of this with the use of a single button press is frankly a testament to Carlson's knack for building complex situations out of a simple framework, something he's been doing his entire career. If I had not already played this game, and I heard, as you just did, that a good portion of it requires carrying worlds into other worlds and finding things within those worlds that you might need additional worlds to solve so that you can continue traveling through that world, well, that sounds a bit overwhelming. But not once did I actually feel overwhelmed while playing Cocoon. One of the ways it cuts that feeling off is by restricting the player from moving around too freely and limiting the amount of places you can travel in any given area. Cocoon frequently utilizes context-sensitive barriers that will appear after you enter a new area, preventing you from traveling backwards until you've accomplished what you need to do in each new section. This means that if you're stumped by a puzzle, you can't go aimlessly wandering around previous regions hoping to find a solution that isn't there. Nearly all of the more complex puzzles in Cocoon are isolated to one specific area. When you're finished with a puzzle, you'll rarely come back to it or even to its general space. Cocoon makes a living on consistent, steady progress from one puzzle to the next, eliminating the need to retrace your steps in order to solve a new problem. And the few times you will revisit old areas, it's to interact with the level in new ways, and the game guides you directly to these specific points of interest without you having to wander. Additionally, each individual world in Cocoon is not fully open to explore. You'll only be utilizing certain parts of them depending on your progress through the game. You can imagine how overwhelming it could get jumping between 3 or 4 entirely separate open environments. So to keep things more manageable, you're only required to jump between deliberately segregated areas of each world. Again, this may sound kind of restrictive, but in reality it creates a fascinating hybrid of level design, with the worlds themselves being traversed in mostly a structured, linear fashion, but since you're so frequently traveling between those worlds, the gameplay experience is anything but linear. I think this is something that Cocoon gets very right in an area that many other games struggle with. In a seemingly needless effort to remain obtuse, puzzle games are not always the best at signposting where the player should be moving, causing frequent stints of backtracking and wandering around until you happen to stumble upon the right piece of the equation. Cocoon doesn't bother with this kind of outdated design, and instead respects the player's time and intelligence by keeping nearly everything in front of you, exactly where it should be. Carlson's previous work on both Limbo and Inside saw him creating a series of well-paced, satisfying puzzles that gradually ramp up in intricacy. But one criticism of those games is that they didn't take things far enough in this regard, leaving players wondering about the potential of what these creative developers could have done with the mechanics they established. I would be very surprised to find anyone who's made it to the end of Cocoon to have that same criticism this time. The same excellent pacing and gradual change in challenge that we saw in Limbo and Inside are back, but things are certainly taken to a higher level of complexity here. During the last hour or so of playing Cocoon, there were multiple moments during which I audibly said, "Oh, no way," as if in disbelief of some of the clever world-twisting solutions this game was pulling off. And truthfully, if I were to describe some of these puzzles to you step by step on paper, you could reasonably wonder whether or not the process of solving them is simply uninteresting or tiresome. There is a lot of world jumping here. There is a lot of placing and replacing orbs into pedestals. There is a lot of swapping one orb for another. There are plenty of moments when one or multiple worlds need to be stored within a different one. There are many times when the abilities granted from one orb need to be used inside of another. So you'd be forgiven to hear all this and think it sounds like a tedious process of unnecessary movement, item placement, and world swapping. But you'll never actually find that in Cocoon. The fast travel between worlds is seamless and quick, with little to no loading at all. And the locations at which you can use this travel feature are very precisely placed so that they're always there when you need them. If you need to carry one orb into another, the pedestals that you can drop the orbs into are always nearby, usually even within the same screen that you just flew into. When these types of interactions are required for a puzzle, you are never traveling far no matter which world is used as the hub and which are used as the items. Everything about these moments is meticulously designed to streamline as much as possible. And perhaps most importantly is that across all of this, your character moves quickly. I cannot overstate how much the playability of this game improves with the decision to provide a swift movement speed. Never did I feel like I was slowly trudging back and forth between areas. Character movement is fluid and responsive. Interactions like swapping orbs or activating symbols are smooth with no delay. Everything here just feels good and never gets in the way, especially when combined with the streamlined level design in critical areas. These are seemingly simple quality of life choices that together make a huge impact on the player's experience, and they show the awareness that Carlson and his team have when it comes to creating sequences that are thought-provoking but also enjoyable. Puzzles should be difficult to solve. They should not be difficult to carry out, and Cocoon gets this fact right better than maybe any of its counterparts. Finally, even with all the clever design work that goes on throughout Cocoon's worlds, there are occasionally times when the player still needs just a little bit of guidance. Cocoon does this in two ways. Sometimes by directly pointing you in the right direction, and other times by confirming your choices to be the correct ones. So there are several points in Cocoon where you need to find these little drones and use them to dispel barriers like this one. These barriers are many times located in areas of the level you've already seen, but just like many other games that implement this technique, it's kind of unlikely that you'll remember exactly where each one is, especially when it may be located in an entirely different world. So these drone characters provide a bit of an assist with this problem with their lights that always point in the direction of your objective. Generally, I kind of dislike quest arrows and directional pathways, but here it feels like a good choice for three reasons. One, it's used sparingly, only in situations where these drones pop up and not in any other puzzles throughout the game. Two, the drones only point to your ultimate objective, the place it needs to go. They don't point to your next step in the puzzle or the components you need to solve to get there. And three, the points of interest you're trying to find can sometimes require bouncing between worlds, something I think most players are not interested in trial and erroring, so being directed to that information is a welcome feature. Now, the other way that Cocoon gives you a nudge of guidance is through a cool piece of sound design. During moments of deciphering tougher problems, Cocoon will often let you know you're on the right track by playing subtle sound effects at key points. These are just slight swells in the soundscape that happen in the middle of puzzles as you complete a minor action like crossing over a pathway the way you're intended. These sounds are understated enough that it actually took me a while to realize what was going on when they were triggered, but I came to really appreciate this small touch. In fact, by the end of the game, I almost found myself seeking out this form of approval, awaiting my little job well done by the developers when I made a correct decision. And I think this is the true explanation behind why this edition works so well. It taps into the psychology of small wins, providing the player with minor milestones on their way to the bigger picture. I can't confirm this, but it feels like the developers anticipated the moments most likely to stump players, and those are the points they inserted these sound effects, recognizing that the player would appreciate a pat on the back upon getting there. Really nice touch, and like so many other things in Cocoon, it's integrated incredibly smoothly. Cocoon is a tremendous showcase of careful design. It's a game that deliberately manipulates space and perspective and logic, but it never feels unintuitive. It takes a complex gameplay mechanic and makes it widely accessible, creating order where there should be chaos. By streamlining the player experience and adopting a design philosophy that includes only the most essential components, the team at Geometric Interactive have managed to create a really special puzzle adventure that sets new standards for what is possible in the genre. After all, if a game like Cocoon can take an impossible premise and turn it into a polished, satisfying, mind-bending experience, imagine what other worlds might be out there when we look at things from a new perspective. Oh hey, remember me? While I didn't want to spoil specific puzzles from Cocoon in this video, this example from the intro is an actual scenario from the game. If you're interested in seeing how this problem works, how we solve it, and why it's a great example of each bullet point from this video, I've recorded a live breakdown of the entire thing that you can find on my newly launched Patreon page. If you want to skip that and just see more regular content, do me a favor and like this video, subscribe if you're really into this stuff, and leave a comment letting me know if you found Cocoon and other puzzle games like it as compelling as I did. See you next time.